coming any second.
All right, I think we're live on X.
Here comes YouTube. Hey everyone, welcome to the new media show. Rob, how are you?
I'm doing terrific, Todd. How are you?
I'm doing great, and in the new studio. Well, not new studio, back in the Philippines, and we've got the new gear set up. So far, so good. Although Roadcaster is always being picky, but I've done some mitigation. I have a little bit of a clue. Once in a while, when you hit record, it just decides to disconnect from the computer. So I've hit record well ahead of the start today. So we'll see. Hey, but getting right in the stack, we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about.
Yeah. Hopefully we can do it all in an hour, right?
Yeah, well, we're going to do it in an hour, and we're get everything covered in an hour. But there's lots of news on the festival side. Of
Yep.
course, the podcast awards kicked off, and podcast movement that should be interesting. I don't know what you're hearing on your side.
Well, I want to hear what you're hearing. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
kind of we'll get into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, right.
The HLS discussion, which I giggle a little bit about. Um, TrueFans, just yes, a whole bunch of stuff going on here. Apple in 20 years. That's probably the one to start with. You know,
Okay.
well, I don't know, but just thinking about here we are.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
it's an important
yeah,
date, right?
yeah, and
Mhm.
they did a good job of promoting and sending emails, and I saw lots of web discussions and social discussions about wow, Apple's been supporting podcasts for 20 years. Wow. Yeah. But I wish they would have promoted some shows that have actually been podcasting for 20 years. So,
Well, they went back. I guess they had shows in there that were kind of grouped
yeah.
by blocks of time, like I think 10-year spans or 5 or 6 year spans or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was
So,
definitely this, and they basically had made an impact. My list might have been a little bit different, but yeah, it
yeah,
was a good
sure.
list nonetheless. And for the modern audience, they could give two hoots on shows that have been doing 20 years. So I understand their methodology and trying to get the
Yeah.
most bang for the buck for this modern day audience.
Yeah. If you're new to podcasting and you haven't been around it that long, it's probably not that relevant to you to know the shows that were around 20 years ago. Right.
Yeah, but
But, but the truth is that there's a few of them that are still around.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This is not one of them, by the way. So we're not a 20-year show,
No.
although sometimes it feels like it. But
I don't even know exactly how long we have been around.
I,
What
I have to go
what's
back
the
and
date?
look, but it's close.
Probably at least 15 at least.
Yeah, I have to. We keep bringing this up, and I need to get the actual number again because I kind of don't pay attention to it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I guess it depends if you count when we actually started the show, which is the Saturday morning tech show.
Right, right, right.
Um, if you count that or not, or do you only count from when we switched to the new name?
Yeah, because we went quite a
So,
while with the other one. But I tell you,
yep.
it was though kind of heartening, and there was a lot of discussion on X about the 20 years, and I think the nice part about them announcing that is reasserting that hey, audio is still fantastic and doing well, and
Hmm.
that we've been here from the beginning. And if anything else, it just reminded people. We've seen a bit of an uptick in Apple Podcast use. We'll see how July turns out. We haven't run the numbers yet, but June they had a bump, and I think someone I saw on one of the other socials said that Buzzsprout saw an evening as well where Apple made some gains here. So
Mm.
maybe you know, people are coming
I
back
wonder
to the
what that could
roost.
be attributed to. Is there what was there some kind of a software update that Apple made, or
I
do you
don't
think
think
there was
so.
some?
I think it's there was just, maybe volume, and maybe it's inclined. It's June. It's or May, June, July. Maybe we are in a situation where people are on the go more, and maybe they're using Apple Podcasts more than they are Spotify. So again, that's just pure speculation on my part. But
Yeah.
we're not a good barometer of Spotify to begin with. So
Right.
from our
Yeah.
our percentage. But anyway, it's good to see them to make the announcement, and I think they had an opportunity to hear, and they did well. It was Apple esque in its style, so it
Hmm.
was good for sure.
Yeah.
But
And so let's go ahead and mention something. I mean, I think we've both been talking about on this show for a while now that we kind of feel like the conference side of podcasting might be waning a little bit, at least in the US. I can't really say that about the podcast show in London, but it just feels that way here, Todd. Doesn't it to you? Is that an accurate kind of
yeah,
feeling?
yeah, it does.
And this topic popped up in Pod News about this live podcast festival of sorts or live podcast event that's starting to looks like it's starting to grow, and it's moved from being outside of the U.S. to including an event in New York City. And I know that Todd, uh, both of us have been involved in um, podcasting events that have included live on stage events, right?
Yeah.
And I think what was the name of the one that we did together in Seattle? What was it?
Oh, that was
PodCon.
yeah, PodCon. Yeah,
PodCon. And I remember that event too, and I'm sure you do too. There were a couple of live on stage podcasting events at that event that had a lot of people in the audience,
oh
right?
yeah,
It was
it was
very,
big
very,
numbers.
very well attended.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been to a lot of live events over the years too that have had a lot of people attending in person,
Mm-hmm.
to a live on stage performance, right? And I just wonder if maybe the popularity of podcasting has reached a scale and a scope that maybe it makes sense to start doing more on stage, in person kind of, you know, podcast events.
I think it works for those shows that are big, but you have to be big.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Well, sure. But that's kind of always been the case,
Yeah.
though. I think, even the shows at PodCon were big popular shows, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's obvious if a show gets a big audience to pay for a ticket,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Smodcast was another one of them, with Kevin Smith out of LA. He's a big movie maker and had a very popular kind of cult following around him. He would do his Smodcast podcast live on stage and he'd get 1,000 people showing up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
So
So,
it's called the Cheerful Ears. So is this a
yeah,
comedy group? Is that what it is?
correct. Correct.
See,
Yeah.
they've always done well. The comedy folks have always done well
Yeah.
with live events.
So, if you back up and you look at what's going on here, they've decided to put on a U.S. event here in New York City here in October. So it's coming up, and Todd, this is kind of the first time outside of like maybe Comic Con or other kind of more cultural events, kind of geek culture events, or even like the event that we went to a lot down in Atlanta. Not Comic Con, but
VidCon. I mean, no, Dragon Con.
yeah,
All the
yeah,
cons.
right, right. So those events have always had like live on stage
Yeah.
podcasting events. Um, so I just wonder if we're kind of moving into that phase now, where we'll see more of this. I'm being a little speculative here about maybe what we might start seeing happen more. But what's your thoughts on this, Todd?
Well, it's I remember having attended some in the early days, where musicians and so forth were doing, live events as part of their podcast audience. So it's the Rock and Roll Geek Show and Brian Alvey and Coverville. And if I'm getting names misassociated wrong, I apologize in advance. So it's not. I think it's those had huge followings. So I think that it just makes sense if you can get in a geographic area that you can pull enough people.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's a big enough show or
yeah,
group of shows. Yeah, because I think even the podcast show did some live on stage events
yeah,
uh, at their. I think they've been doing that the whole life of the event. And then I I went to for many years the Los Angeles Podfest or Podcast Festival. I think it was called back then, and they did the same thing. They brought in a bunch of comedian podcasters from L.A. and they packed the house.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I don't know. It seems like maybe we're heading into a phase that's much more fan focused.
yeah.
Um, and and I don't know what that means for the business side of podcasting. If
I
because
think
some
it
of those
means
events
I
have
think it
had,
means for those shows, maybe a payday. You know, that's
well, I mean that's certainly
potentially.
true. But as we think back on all these events that you and I have participated in, there's always been a little bit of an exhibition that's
Mm,
been associated with it,
yeah,
right?
these are
Where
not. No,
there's like
it's
a day or two or something like that. And that
yeah.
might be an opportunity for some of the podcast hosting companies to get in front of new people again, potentially like we did back then. I'm not exactly sure why those events kind of faded away, um, but maybe they're coming back.
Well,
Um,
if you have a receptive venue and it
yeah,
doesn't cost too much, and comedy
right.
clubs and so forth are set up to support this anyway. So, if you organize with a promoter and you can come into an event for a day or two and guarantee
Hmm.
that you're going to have, you basically buy the buy the venue and liquor
Right.
and seat sales and all that. It's probably relatively low hanging fruit and low risk. I'm sure there's some cost involved, but I would assume that it's um, probably not that big of an outlay. And it's not like they're going to be outlaying hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't think that's the case at all. And if you've got a big enough audience and a big enough, your budget probably is not probably, and it does well to build community. So
Yeah.
but for a small that's, but what would a show size have to be in order to pull this off? If it's just one show, it's hard, but I would imagine 4, 5, 6 shows. How many folks are they talking about in this New York event? Looks like What Went Wrong, Go Touch Grass, The Puzzler with AGG. I don't know any of these shows.
Well,
So three
the
three shows, I guess,
okay, it says for um,
for New York.
all of the events they're expecting about 15, oh no, 15 days of live podcasts.
Oh,
Um, but
that's
Todd, I think
interesting.
the thing to take away is that just because we haven't heard of the podcast
Oh, I
before
know, I
doesn't
know, I
make
know,
it
I know.
not a
But
popular
but
show.
the New
But
York the New York
it's
date says 7 to 9 October, so they're doing something more than that? Oh, it's over 15 days in 3 different cities, Melbourne, New
correct,
York, and London. I
correct,
got you.
correct.
Ah,
Yeah, and it doesn't list how many podcasts are going to be doing it. And oftentimes these events are either held in one venue,
right.
a theater or something like that, like a community movie theater, and they just have the shows do back to back live
Yeah.
shows, and they sell individual tickets or they sell an all day ticket. Um, So it just depends on what the organizers want to do with it. But
Yeah.
that's how I've seen it organized in the past. Also, the Vancouver, BC podcast festival did a similar thing as well, and I went to a bunch of different movie theaters across Vancouver to go to different live on stage recordings.
Right.
And so it just feels like this is a way for some of the larger ones, and to some degree smaller shows can probably get involved in this to some degree. It's all proportional to the size of the venue.
Yeah, and and
Um,
and I think they're also they have some headliners, so that means there are definitely some others that are participating, but they,
mhm.
they've got their main pulls. So that's, we'll see. And of course, we're just about a month, a little more than a month away from Dallas. So, that in itself is going to be a bellwether of what's really happening in the podcast event space as well.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about podcast movement. I mean, what are you hearing? I'm not really hearing that
I'm
much, to
hearing
be
nothing,
honest with you.
hearing nothing. Absolutely. Except for their announcements, their emails that are coming out.
Well, that, and I have been getting asked if I'm going.
Mm,
So it's on August 18th through the 21st,
yeah.
and I'm sure that you're going, right?
Yeah, I'm going. Yep. And, we're out in the middle of the boondocks again in in that Gaylord. So, you're kind of landlocked to that place. They've got some deal with them, and
Oh yeah.
instead of having a venue where you can walk out of it and go somewhere else. um we were looking at
Well,
trying to save some money and being in a hotel in a different location, and it just, by the time we did the Uber and figured out what the logistics would be, we decided it wasn't worth it.
I mean, that's a double-edged sword, right? If you have it in a place where everybody leaves,
Yeah.
that's not necessarily good for building community.
But the community building doesn't really happen too much anymore in it's podcast movement has
Well,
turned.
it's never going to happen if you have a venue
That's
that
true.
everybody leaves,
Yeah.
right?
But again, it's,
Yep.
it's turning into more of a real regular conference where,
Yeah, it's a
it
business event. Is what it
yeah,
is.
the business is not happening as much in the bars as it used to, or in the side lounges or wherever after the show.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it. I mean, Todd, to kind of bring it to, I think, a logical conclusion here. It not so much a conclusion to the event, but just kind of a observation. What's going on is that increasingly most of the people that go to this event don't really care about the sessions anyway. Um, they go there and they're booked up all day with
right.
meetings, with
Yep.
people,
They're doing
and it's
side
just not
meetings
really
and
about going
mhm.
to learn anything,
Yep.
you know, and there's probably a good percentage of the people that go that are actually on stage presenting
I
or
had,
on panels, right?
and here's the thing, and maybe they've they've really impacted their own demise because maybe I shouldn't use that word because I don't know if that's the case. But again,
Well, it's not in the growth phase anymore, that's for sure.
no, no, it's not in the growth phase. And we'll have a hard decision to make this year when we go. Based on traffic. If the
Yeah,
traffic's not there, then why go? And it was a flagship event that
yeah,
I said we would never miss.
right.
And if it's not a flagship event again where we're meeting people, and it doesn't necessarily have to be new podcasters. We know the new podcasters are not going to that event. Maybe they're not.
Right. No.
Um, so for us, we're going with a different strategy this year. And basically promoting our new product that we're launching to get the word out on that. Because going as a podcast host has little appeal to people that are existing and haven't already or with a podcasting company. We
Yeah.
get, like the podcast show London, we've probably got 40 to 50 that move to us from other hosts, which is a remarkable number. We don't would never get that from an event like Podcast Movement. It just won't happen. Because those people don't come talk to you. They look at you and they say, "Oh yeah, here you are, wave," and keep on walking. So,
Yeah. Well, and you're part of, 5 5 or 6 other podcast hosts too, so
yeah,
everybody's got their show at different places,
yeah.
and I don't think that there's a lot of new podcasters that go to that event. I think
Wow.
if they're attending that event, they're probably already a podcaster.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So,
So,
like I said, so
it's
this year
not like
we're
the old days. It's
no,
not like the old days.
so it's why we're promoting our new product that we should
Yeah.
have in beta by the time the event starts. So, I think we'll see, and I think for Chris down at Podfest, I think he has a huge opportunity here um,
Yeah.
to capture that audience that may have originally went. And again, podcast movements. Again, it's middle of the week, 18 to the 21st of August. So half my team this week is out on vacation. So
Yeah. Well, it's a holiday weekend in the
y-
US,
and at
coming
this,
up.
but at the same time, it's summer, and you 18, 19, 20, 20 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Your whole week is shot. We fly out on Friday to come home, and uh,
Yeah.
and the average, and we've said this on the show 100 times, the average independent content creator, they can't they can't do it. They can't take that many vacation days. Whereas someone that's there from a business, for me, that's perfect. I leave, I fly out Monday morning. I get in there Monday mid morning. We set the booth up Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then boom, back on Friday, and I'm home for the weekend.
Right.
So in that regards, it's perfect for a business, but not for a creator.
Yeah.
But we
So,
haven't.
anyway,
Go ahead.
we'll see, right?
Yeah, we'll see.
And I'm not holding out a lot of hope, but
Keep my fingers crossed here. Yeah.
I mean, I would like to go, but we'll see on that. I might,
A,
you
a
know,
ticket cost and hotel cost,
right?
it's not insignificant. Yeah,
No, it's not.
I'm looking at the hotel bill, what it's going to be. I'm like, good Lord, I'm not staying in New York City. I'm in Dallas, for God's sake. You know,
Yeah,
and the
right.
the room should be 100, a night.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
not.
that's what they've done in the past, right? But
Yeah, good.
this deal with Gaylord
Yeah,
made it 300 a night,
and
right?
then you top on because you're locked in there, and you talk about food. So, you're going to blow per diem staying there because unless you order
Yeah.
Uber, Uber Eats.
Yeah, or you're fasting during the whole event.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Which I've done before. I've actually fasted and only eaten once a day. So, but anyway,
and it still costs you $50. Yeah.
right, right. So you announced that your voting's open for the 20th anniversary of the People's Choice
Yeah.
Podcast Awards.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And registrations,
congratulations, Todd.
yeah,
20
registrations
years.
down a little bit this year. So there's some opportunities in a few categories. It'll all fill in, but there's just so many award systems now. We got hit up by the
Oh
British
yeah,
Podcast Awards, and it's like where do people focus? When there's 20 awards, and it feels to me like everyone's trying to get their 10 cents out of the space, and in
yeah,
having awards, and we've got enough people registered to cover our costs, thank God. But it's a good opportunity for some categories. If you're a Spanish podcast, you need to go over there and get listed. We don't even have 10 Spanish podcasts that are registered right now, but the other
yeah,
categories are pretty full.
yeah.
But some that are a little,
Yeah, it does
little
seem
thinner.
like every week there's another
Every
award
week.
ceremony being announced. Is
And,
yeah,
I got an email from the folks in the UK, and they say, hey, we're looking for sponsors. And, gave me some very eye opening social media impact numbers. And I'm like, okay, like 140 million or something like that. Even at our peak when we had like 7.1 million people that were participating, of course, listeners participating, um, we've never hit those type of social media, impact numbers ever. Um,
yeah.
So, and I said, "Can you send me your breakout?" And they did. And you have to take it for what it's worth because they look at, every little squeak of the space. But
Yeah.
last year we had about 5 point, I think it was 5.7 million listeners vote. So, but you spread that across all those shows in multiple categories. It's amazing to me when we get down to the end that the separation between the winners and losers are often a handful of votes.
Yeah.
But really, the big part of the People's Choice Podcast Awards is making the slate. If you make the slate, it's as valuable as having one, just from a traffic standpoint.
Yeah.
So if you're a podcaster and you haven't registered, get over there and get her done. $50 gets you in the game. And no, you're not paying for my vacation. You're barely paying for the trophies. Uh, Last year's total trophy bill was about with shipping and everything was about and and duty because we had a bunch of international shipments about $19,000 to ship all the trophies last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of trophies.
Well, it's 30 trophies, but you cost
Yeah.
of trophies and shipping. And you go international and you declare the value of the award and then you pay duty on it. Yeah, it's it's
Yeah.
curious.
So Todd, the debate continues to rage, right? About you know, trying to, podcasters trying to decide if they're going to do video or just audio, right? And and I know where you stand on this, Todd.
Yeah,
That's for sure. And I guess it just gets back to, and why I wanted to bring it up on the show is just to emphasize this again, not to take up a lot of time on it because I think we've beaten this topic to death,
yeah,
but
yeah. And you took a little
is
heat, by the way. I don't know if
I
you've.
did.
Yeah, you did because people were saying, "Rob, you change horses in the middle of the stream." And so there was a few people that called and had basically said, you're coming back to audio." I know you've never really left audio, but there was a few people that
No.
kind of called you out on it. It was kind of funny to me. I think I heard it from at least 5 different people that were like, "Chuckle, chuckle, Rob swinging back to audio."
Well, I I don't know what to say about that, but I've never really been against audio. It's more I got caught up in the enthusiasm of what
Yeah,
was
of
going on
course.
on the video side, right?
And the silver
So,
lure got you.
well, yeah, I've always had the lure of video. It's just that the
Yeah,
industry was kind of like not talking about it.
yeah,
So, I mean, I spent a lot of the early years in this medium, spending a lot of time working with video,
yeah.
and that's why um, I, I kind of have had a little bias towards it coming back like this. And so there's advantages and disadvantages, and so I think one of the things just to reiterate here is what's the advantage of video and what's the disadvantages? Well, the advantages are it engages the audience very visually,
Hmm.
right? And it does allow for creative elements to be added to your content that give a deeper level of communication. Well, the downside of it is it definitely requires a lot more resources and it requires a camera
And you have to be
and lights,
creative.
right? Well, and it's one of those things that I think we are going to move to a period of time, and I think this is happening right now, is we're increasingly creators are thinking video audio first, not video first or audio first. They're thinking, I'm going to launch my show and I'm just going to do both
Yeah.
at the same time, and I'll optimize it for audio and I'll optimize it for video at the
Mm.
same time as best as I can, right? And that's that. There's going to be a certain percentage of the community that's going to make that choice, and it's I think it's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, it gets back to how is the video being distributed, and that's where we get into the real conflict here. Is the influence of YouTube, right? And what role do they have in the future of this? And that's where the topic moves to HLS, right? And That's why the industry is talking about HLS now.
Well, certain
And
players are talking about
right.
HLS.
Well, I hear it being talked about a lot in a lot of different places. There's people that are resistant to it, and there's other ones that are like, that's kind of inevitably where we're going to be.
It,
And
it
so,
boils it boils down to app support,
yeah, it does.
and in the end, um,
Well, the whole podcasting 2.0 project is dependent on
yeah,
the apps.
of course, and
Yeah.
I think that we were streaming this show HLS for quite a while, and
Yeah.
it just got too expensive. I couldn't afford to bill no more, even at an hour a week. And actually, it was more than that. 12 hours a month because I was doing Geek News Central and this
Geek News
show.
Central too. Right.
So it's like 14. The bill was just too big to do it. I couldn't afford it. And based upon the number of people that would go and look at the HLS statistics, and there was one or two people that were watching the video stream. So for the cost, and I'm not doing
So
it
why would it be so expensive if nobody was watching it?
because you're streaming. It costs so much to have that HLS encoder up and running. If you're live
Oh, okay. So
streaming,
it doesn't have anything to do with the bandwidth
no,
usage. Okay.
no, it's just that overhead of doing that. Now that was for a live stream, and we're not talking about on demand. On demand's different. On demand, the bandwidth is the bandwidth. Whatever your cost of your bandwidth is, deliver slices. So, and I saw some discussions about measurement. Well, they've been measuring HLS for a long time. There's a standard for measuring HLS, and they'll just have to get into the spec and determine that what they're going to implement. But
Hmm.
and I'm supportive and for those that want to do it at this point. But I go back to the argument. This show, and for those of you that are watching, you've been watching this show on a podcast app or Apple TV via MP4 for 10, 12, 13, whatever the number of years is here. And it works.
Yeah, it
And
works. Yeah.
and I would say it's a pretty good experience. Whereas
As long as you're not putting up a 4K file, right?
right, right. But at the same time, if a lot of people are connected to Wi-Fi or whatever, they're watching a lot of YouTube stuff at pretty high resolution right now
Yeah,
as
that's true.
well. So again, I think in the end, um, it's good, and they're on the bandwagon, and everyone's kind of woken up. But it to me is okay. From a company standpoint, I have to look at adoption. I can't.
Yeah.
I'm not willing at this point to adopt for less than 1%.
Yeah.
For
Well, I think yeah, I agree with you, Todd. I think you do have to make a rational business choice here around
yeah,
implementation. Your
yeah,
platform already supports video
yeah.
podcasting, so um, there has to be a pretty strong case and savings there. But I think it would be true that if video podcasts got very popular again, I think it would put some strain on your servers
Well, the
to
the
deliver that, right?
well, there's two ways to go about it. We can support HLS right now with the alternate
Yeah.
enclosure. Anyone that wants to do this as an individual content creator, they can set up an HLS3. They go over to
Yeah.
CloudFront or one of those groups, and they can stream their show today via HLS without Blubrry implementing anything. If you want to play ball, no sweat. Just drop that HLS link into the field. We call it M8. It's an M8 something, whatever the format of that is, and
Hmm.
hit save, and you're good. If you want it, it's available immediately. I'm not going to take a MP4 that has been uploaded to us and chop it up and create an HLS stream. I don't see the point at this point. If Apple decided to support video more aggressively,
Hmm.
and if and at this point, all Apple supports via video is MP3 and M4A,
MP,
and MP4.
right? Yep.
So,
On a download basis. Yeah.
yeah, or progressive download, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
So, they support it today, and if they say, "Yep, we're going to support the alternate enclosure and HLS," well, that's a little different deal. Um, this is not necessarily a chicken and egg situation where I'm going to build it and maybe they're going to come, which we've done with all the other podcasting 2.0 stuff. We've stuck our neck out on
Yeah.
that and are promoting it as features that are being pretty well adopted across more devices.
Yeah.
You look at Pocket Cast and others have done recently, but the HLS piece, I have something that works right now that's not broken. So, you
Right.
know,
Unless the industry decides to push this direction because the opportunity with video podcasting starts to unfold again,
yeah.
at a scale that doesn't really scale well,
Well,
with a download model.
the industry has to be the apps. If the apps, if Overcast and all the apps will support the alternate enclosure, and I can put an
It's a
MP4 in the alternate enclosure too.
right. Well, you can have as many alternate
Right.
enclosures as you want,
Right.
right? So,
So
I mean, you could have a MP4 in there plus an HLS.
yeah,
Just depends on what the app is that
yep.
what the app wants to support.
So unless the apps
So,
support it, and
right.
if the apps get on the game, um, it's very slick on how it works currently in podcasting 2.0. Again, this HLS thing is something fantastic. We've been doing HLS when podcasting 2.0 apps now for more than a year, and again, people would watch this show live via an HLS stream, and
Yeah.
I paid by the minute on that for just having that streamer turned on. And there would have
Mhm.
been additional costs. And if it had got popular, then it'd have been even worse because then I'm paying for bandwidth too. So, but just to turn the streamer on. Now, the conversion of that media, we were talking with our Amazon rep at AWS, and matter of fact, we're going to have a meeting here in a week or two talking to them about this because I broke down the cost. I said, this doesn't work. I said, this just
Yeah.
from a cost standpoint, I've done the math here, and um, there's a reason that YouTube owns all their infrastructure. There's a
Right.
reason they own all their fiber, and we don't
Yeah.
even know if YouTube's even profitable. They've never reported it or not. They still could be bleeding money. Um, But I
Well,
think you can measure this. There are stuff in the IAB spec that allow the YouTube's measuring it. They're streaming stuff.
oh yeah.
Just the methodology
Yeah.
has
I
to
mean,
change.
it is remarkable the metrics that YouTube has.
Yeah, because you can
Um,
get down to the byte or to the
right.
slice. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Down to
it's
the second. Down
right.
to the second.
Yeah.
R- it's remarkable the level of information they have about audiences.
And it's you get
And
a good amount of client side data, but again, once the apps implement, you might not get as good a measurement back. You're so you know again, until there are, I'm not going to put an ounce of brain work at it as far as measurement goes until there's, substantial download numbers. And I know that, some Sam over at TrueFans and other places are probably not happy to hear me say this, but there has to be, the apps have to pick the speed up at this point. And do the apps want to be
well,
viable?
it's the chicken or the egg thing, right?
Right.
Who comes first? Is it
Well,
the hosting platforms making it possible, or is it the apps making it possible? They kind of have to do it at the same time,
Well,
don't they?
for 2 years, I've done the chicken and egg thing here with being the chicken, and the apps have been slow on adopting, all these
They
other
just don't eat the
features.
eggs, right? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying,
they
Todd?
they don't implement stuff, and
Yeah.
there it has to be a two-way street. The
Yeah.
the podcasting 2.0 apps are adopting. but
Yeah.
let's get Apple to say we're going to adopt. Um,
Well, from what I gather, HLS is an Apple technology,
yeah, it
isn't it?
is. It is for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, all Apple would have to do is make an announcement that we're going to support HLS, and it changes the conversation,
It
doesn't
does. It does
it?
change the conversation. And but
Right.
Apple can fix if heading in the gang, whoever's listening, um, all it's again, they move at glacier speeds over there just because
Glacier speed.
of the ecosystem. They don't get their developers aren't they don't have 5 developers dedicated to Apple Podcasts. They get timeshare
Yeah. Right.
on
Those developers are working on other
multiple
apps in
things.
their
Yeah.
ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right.
But if
So
once the first step is really just making video a first class citizen, don't bury it no more. And if you do that,
yeah, just
just
make
do
it
that.
easier to discover it, right?
Yeah, just do
Like it
that.
used to be, right?
Right. Yeah. Make it easy.
That's all they have to do, right?
And if the solution is they're gonna adopt the alternate enclosure, which I don't want to sound like Rob Walsh, but this is one I
Be a
think is a
cold day in hell,
I
right?
no,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say that because Apple's adopted stuff already. But
Oh, I know they have. Yeah, right.
I think it's a big leap. If they do, then fantastic. We're ready to go with MP4 tomorrow. Well,
Yeah.
today.
Or you're talking about um,
If Apple
MP4, or you're talking about the HLS stuff?
if Apple supports alternate enclosure,
Right.
and if they do, they're going to support an MP4 in that alternate enclosure.
Yeah,
So
right.
you don't
That
need
would probably be
HL.
their first move,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. If they did alternate enclosure, if and who knows? Maybe Spotify will surprise us and wake up, but I doubt it. You know, they did something.
I
With
think it would be a smart move of theirs. Now, the question is that are they going to continue to allow you to host it off of your hosting platform, or are they just
uh,
going to grab the
they're
copy of
gonna
it and
grab it.
rehost it?
Yeah,
Right.
that's what Spotify's gonna do. But again,
Yeah.
uh, I don't know. And people are
So
already having conversations, behind closed doors about, this ongoing push for video within Spotify. But
I think this is going to be a hot topic at Podcast Movement. So I
I
would
think
definitely
with
keep
the,
your ears to the
I
ground.
think with there's no app developers there. So who's the conversation with amongst ourselves,
Yeah.
among the podcast
Like it
industrial
always has been.
complex? Yeah.
Right.
The app developers. Now, there was some app developers in London. So that was fantastic that we had some of those folks that were there.
That's
Um,
interesting that they went to London, but
well,
they
they were
didn't.
in
Okay.
London. They're based in
Oh,
Europe.
oh, they're actually based there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But you're not going to see Marco at Podcast Movement. You're not going to.
Hmm.
So the conversation is going to be amongst ourselves. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get too wrapped around the ankle with it. First thing you got to do. Let's just be kind of frank. You want to do video podcasting. Freaking support video podcasting in its form that it works today. Just support
Yeah,
it as
that's a
it
good
does
place to
now.
start. I agree with you,
Yeah,
Todd.
you start with where it is right now.
Yeah.
There's been a path for 20 years, so just support it the way it works right now.
Yeah.
It may
That's
not be
that's a
optimal.
terrific first stage.
Yeah, that's the first step. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
but I don't think these folks are want to do that. And
Yeah.
you start doing the math on this. You're not going to do this on a $20 hosting plan. It's not happening.
No.
No.
I did notice that the Podpage folks decided that they were going to support HLS podcasts
Well,
too.
it's easy for
So,
them to do so. All they have to do is put it in their player. I can
right.
support it too. I just got to make a modification to my player to support it. No big deal. Easy.
Yeah.
But they're not carrying any of the load.
No, of course not.
No, they're not running servers to serve HLS. So their
Mm-mm.
announcement was, they put a little fix in for their player to support HLS. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now you want to do something cool, Podpage, make it so that you support live item. And when someone goes, makes support the flip, audio or video.
Yeah.
So,
Well, they do both.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, but yeah, I don't know that they support live yet. So
yeah.
through like
Well, if they support HLS, they
the
support live.
well, they can, but
Yeah,
do they? It's yeah, right,
yeah.
because you have
So,
to be able to support it off of a live streaming
right.
connection,
It
right?
all looks the same on the web player or on the phone. It doesn't matter if it's
Yeah,
live or if it's on demand. It it it,
right,
it plays back the same. It's the same protocol, same
right,
slices, everything. The only
right.
difference is when you're streaming it live. In other words, like right now, it's that video is being coded into HLS live, as it's happening. Thus the cost to do live.
Well, Todd, like you mentioned just a few minutes ago, you said, well, a podcast can go out and create an account with such and such platform and do an HLS
Sure.
stream and all that kind of stuff and get a link and all this kind of
Yep.
stuff. But I'm not sure that the podcast hosts want content creators doing that.
Why not?
Um, do
It's
they
it's
really?
it's an alternate enclosure. You can put whatever you want in there. So they
No,
could.
but I'm just saying from a customer support issue, do you
First of
guys
all,
want people to go off and host with other people?
well, they're not hosting with a podcast host. They're gonna be hosting with Cloud
No,
Player or somebody like that. Yeah.
well, there's a bunch of companies that support HLS out
Oh
there.
yeah, for sure.
So I'm just not sure that the industry really knows who those players are. I
Just
guess it's probably not hard to
it's not hard.
find.
Just do a Google search and you can find 10 and then go look at the
Yeah.
pricing. So the average podcaster is going to see this and their
Well,
eyes are going to roll back in their head and they're not going to do it.
do you think that those platforms are gouging on their pricing on this?
No, it's expensive.
Yeah, but what makes it expensive? Is it just server
All the
resources
processing, yeah.
in slicing up the media
Probably
file
the
into
biggest
chunks
the biggest piece of the expense is the processing of the video. You
to
no
slice it up into
yeah,
chunks?
yeah. And
Right.
then the storage, how that's going to be stored. That package because it's basically a package. It's a playlist package essentially.
Yeah. Okay. It's just a series of chunks of
Yeah.
video content that are put into like a
and and and
symbolically like
and
a
where the
folder of sorts.
and where the
Right.
costs can get expensive depending on who you're hosting with is those get requests because every slice is a get request, get, and if you're charged by the get, that adds up too. On a MP4 you get one get to get the media file. On HLS there is that's just hammering entire, just get the next slice, get the next slice, get the next slice. So that that raises the cost of delivery, depending on who you're hosting with.
So typically, how small are the chunks as far as
There could be
file
a there
size
could
or
be again, don't quote me on this, but I heard there could be 600 for an hour.
okay. So 10 a minute.
Something roughly like that. Yeah. So
Okay.
again, I'm not the tech spec guy on this, so don't quote me. I might be wrong. There's a whole bunch of I one of my devs did a
Can you set that, or is that set by the server based on
that
the
I don't
bandwidth?
know, but I'm probably there's some configuration settings there that you can set. But also you got to be able to support the downsize too. You got to be able to go to the smaller video encoding. You got to be able to support 640 by 360, 1280 by 720, 1920 by 1080. So it's not just
Or 4K, maybe. Right.
right. So there's that too. So this is where the encoding cost and storage is storage and bandwidth is bandwidth.
So would you have to pull a different chunk for each of those formats?
I don't know. I'm assuming you would have to have for every video format you're going to support for depending upon the internet connection. You probably have to. I don't know. Again, I'm talking out of my butt at this point. I just don't know. We'd have to have someone that knows how that
Yeah.
encoding works to explain, how many copies
Okay.
of this media do you get? Do you get a, 640 by 320, and does it? You have 8 different playlists, and then it moves based upon bandwidth allowance. That I don't understand at all. So yeah, it's
So would it only track down to, okay, let's say it pulled um, 10 times each minute. So it pulls what, 6 seconds of content?
and again, I'm just thinking this is how it works. I don't quote
Right,
me, but I'm
right,
assuming it pulls so many seconds ahead.
right. Okay.
You know, and then again,
Anyway,
yeah, fun stuff. So again, it's uh,
and we're
MP
starting to unpack
MP4
the details on this. Right.
MP. Someone that knows HLS back inside and out can come on the show and tell us. But
Yeah.
MP4 still works without any headache.
Well, and it also does its own kind of package delivery as well, right? Even the download has packets that are delivered based on the speed of the connection.
Yeah, it's
But
chunked.
that's that's variable based on the
Right.
speed of the connection,
Yeah.
which makes the analytics of that not as precise.
No. No. And that's the challenge with podcasting since the beginning.
Right.
Because a lot of
But
the
if you
apps
have a
just
fast
yeah,
connection, it's
just
going to get more content
yeah, just
in
it's
one request.
yeah, a lot of the
Right.
apps now pull our number of apps that we're looking at to get partial data is shrinking as more apps are just because of the technology's improved and they update the app. They say, okay, we're just going to grab the whole thing at once. We're not going to,
And the speed of the connection
yeah,
too. Right.
yeah, just grab the whole
Yeah.
file. And
Yeah.
even on
That
video,
makes,
so
right.
again, it's funny. No one, we have nary once in the lifetime of this show gotten a single complaint from a listener that the video playback sucked.
On a download delivery of a video file.
Right.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
So if you're watching this on your phone and the delivery sucks, let us know. Let us know. Or are you watching on your Apple TV, which is connected with a much better, usually data
It's usually
connection?
got a landline type of a
Right.
connection. Right.
Yeah, connected via
Usually.
Wi-Fi.
Yep.
So even here, I'm 40. What's my connection? I'm 40/40. So I get 4K here, no problem on my Apple TV. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. We're almost out of time, Rob. Or if we don't
Yeah,
want, if
we
we
are.
want to stay within the hour, Odyssey's doing something here. What are they doing?
They decided to work with iHeartRadio's app to make their podcasts available. So they've teamed up.
Hmm.
Thought that was interesting.
Well, okay.
The Odyssey app is not as popular in the App Store as iHeart's app.
Oh, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Odyssey just got their content in front of potentially more listeners
But at the
by
same
doing
time,
this deal.
the same time, uh, you know, eh, uh, they don't
It's
have a
all
lot
driven
of.
by advertising, isn't it?
Well, they iHeart does not have a lot of market share when it comes to podcast. For those
Right.
podcasts that are on there being pulled by RSS, it's not that. They're down in the weeds. Someone said Amazon just broke 1%. I'll have to go and look this month, but I find that hard to believe too. And matter of fact, how
So is
how
that
is
a
that?
consolidated number of Amazon Music as well as like the
Well, Amazon
Audible platform?
Amazon technically anything that's in Amazon being produced by Amazon doesn't have an
It's
RSS
counted.
feed. So if you're on Amazon and have so the only thing that they're tracking that we're tracking is anything that's connected via an RSS feed.
To the probably the Amazon Music app, right?
Yeah,
As well as maybe tangential to a listing maybe at Amazon.com and
yeah,
then Audible,
yeah.
probably.
So
At least that's what it used to be,
yeah,
right?
So I think we're in a and it's an interesting time in the podcasting space right now. Lots of interesting, hey, by the way, conversations I'm having in confidence with people, and
Hey,
um,
by the way,
hey, by the way, uh,
what does that mean?
well, I think there's some pain out there right now.
Oh, I
Um,
see what you're saying. Okay.
yeah, I think there's some big pain out there. And I think this is where the panic is ensuing in
So, where do you think the pain is kind of
creators,
being felt more?
lack
Is it just the
thereof.
number of new creators?
Yeah, lack of new creators. So how are they going to feed the pipeline? How are we going to, it takes new creators to build big shows, and if they're not there,
Hmm.
you know,
I
it's.
wonder what that means, um, and the reasons for that.
Well, I think
Is it just
I've
because
talked.
people are disappointed with the performance, or
I think it's a combination of things. I think people are busy. I also think that there's lots of choices. It's real easy to do a 60-second TikTok reel. You know, um,
I
there's
guess it
no.
depends on what your goals are, I suppose.
So I think there's a lot of noise, and I think there is also the hesitancy, what I've talked about before. And we just need to keep making people understand that audio is a medium that is very viable, still growing, and that if you're going to start a podcast and you're brand new, you get get your podcast wings with audio. Start there, and that's the messaging we need to be. And that's something you're going to hear coming from me. Um, Otherwise, the landscape in 5 years is going to be very, 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 very different. Podcasting will be here, but will all these companies be here? That is the question.
Well, I guess the other question is there more energy trying to get new creators into podcasting as video podcast creators?
Oh, for sure. That's the YouTube PR machine.
Well, no, I'm talking about outside of YouTube, like with
I
this
think there's.
HLS and download
Yeah, no,
model with RSS.
I don't think so. Most people don't know what HLS even means. Industry people do. You and I
Right.
know.
Oh, yeah, yeah. As far
Yeah,
as normal creators is what
yeah.
I'm saying is not interested in
No,
HLS
no, they
probably.
don't care.
Um, but as far as realizing that they can deliver video through RSS, and I guess that the industry hasn't really,
No,
I don't think it's coalesced in
there's only. I
prioritizing
think
that.
there's only 3 or 4 of us that still that support video to begin with. So how can the podcast industry complex say that they want to support video when you don't even offer video as a hosting plan? Buzzsprout doesn't. They're by far the number one independent podcast hosting company now. They don't support it, and they don't
And
seem
Spreaker as well is another one, right?
to care.
Hmm.
So what's the
You
emergency?
could take the position that that's short-sighted on where younger creators are
No,
increasingly
I think what it is they don't want to incur the cost of doing that.
yeah, okay.
Because you increase your, you drop a video file in, 1.5, 1.6 gigs when you really compress the hell out of it. So why aren't they
Yeah.
supporting video? If they're not, they don't hear them talking about being worried about video.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
yeah. So if the industrial complex is not supporting video for podcasters, why should Apple make the jump to help us support video for podcasters?
Well, do you think that Buzzsprout would change their tune if Apple came out and announced next month that they're gonna double down
And then
on their video podcast support?
I think in about 15 seconds they would. They'd have to.
So
If Apple did a
it's
big
all keyed on what Apple does at
yeah,
this point.
I think so. Yeah. Spotify's already, we're hearing it from creators. Oh, I want to have my a video over on Spotify. Well, we tell them the reasons why maybe you should have a second show over there. and which Spotify hates. So, but we don't hear a lot. That's the difference. We hear a little bit, like maybe every couple of weeks someone asks us, not like every
So
day.
don't upload your video to your same audio version on Spotify is what you're
For
saying.
sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And someone that's from Spotify listened to this are, flipping me the bird right now. So,
Well, I mean, you have to think of it from a creator perspective. It might. I think it makes sense
well, when
at
the
this
creator's
stage to do
losing
that,
money,
especially if you're monetizing
yeah, if they're
like
monetizing on
audio.
audio, then, that revenue's gone.
Yeah.
And you hope that the video revenue, if you're a big name, you're sitting pretty. If you're a big name who's making all the headlines, you're golden because you've got a deal, so
Well, didn't Spotify announce that they were going to pay up to $5,000 to creators to start posting videos
select creators.
to what?
Select creators.
Oh, select. Well,
And
yeah, they're not going to
and
do that
and
to
only
any Joe
5,000?
Blow video creator,
And
right?
only 5,000? Come on. 5,000? That's a pittance. 5,000? If you're a big show, that is like
Yeah,
that's not even one episode of revenue. So
right.
5,000,
But to a freshly new podcaster,
that would be
that's a
some
lot of
money.
dough.
That would be some money. That'd be more money than they would make in a whole year, but they're not going to do that for Todd and Rob. No way they're going to write us a check for 5 grand.
Well, especially us.
Right.
But yeah,
But still.
why would they
Anyway,
do that?
we're
So
over here. We need to get everyone out of here. We're trying to keep this to an hour.
okay, all right, Todd.
So I'm Todd at blueberry.com, at Geek, because Chris is going to mess our buddy up here, at Geek News on X, at Geek News, at geeknews.chat on Mastodon. And we made it through a whole episode getting a master recording, and the Roadcaster duo stayed connected.
Wow,
So,
remarkable.
yeah, and if anyone that works at Rode, why the hell does this thing want to disconnect at 3 minutes into recording? Go ahead, Rob.
I can be found just about anywhere online. Just do a search for my name. So it's easy to find me. You can also send an email to me, rob.greenlee@gmail.com. It'd be great to hear from you and get your thoughts on what you think is going on in the industry. And there's been this whole thread of discussion on X about AI slop and whether or not all the AI content that's coming into the social interest medium platforms out there should be labeled. And I've noticed that some of the platforms out there, I think it was TikTok, I think is the one is actually labeling content that's AI now. But
Good.
does it need to happen more? And that's the raging discussion off of
Well,
my
should it
X
happen?
account right now.
Should it happen in podcasts? Should it be a flag set?
Right, right.
I think so. So,
So, but at what level does it need to happen,
well,
right?
that's the
I mean,
problem. That's where the argument's
that's
going
the
to happen.
question, right?
Yeah.
At what usage level triggers it?
Yeah.
I don't
That's,
think that we have consensus on that.
oh no, that's where the war will happen in the discussion for
Yep.
sure.
So anyway,
Okay.
so send me an email. Great to hear from you. So
And everyone, thank you out here for supporting the show. Appreciate it. We'll be back with you next time. Again, 8 p.m. Eastern now, at least until the first week in August. So all the way through July. All right, everyone, take care. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.
okay. Good night.